Well, it's been 5 years, and it looks like evil's getting back into the habit. Here's your look at the QMX, the Conjuring universe, the Nun, 1/6 scale articulated figure. Warner Brothers, The Conjuring universe, springs from the terrifying true stories of the demonologists Lorraine and Ed Warren. In The Conjuring, they face the malevolent spirit of a murdered witch, and in Conjuring 2, Lorraine has a horrifying vision of a demon, Valak, that takes the form of a nun. Now in the movie prequel, The Nun, the demon stalks the Holy Sisters of the Covenant in Romania. It's an ancient site that holds a dark secret and a portal to hell. This collectible figure has over 36 points of articulation and features 2 different heads, one with her scary "I'm going to get you" stare, and the other in a attack mode with her mouth wide open, revealing terrifying fangs. Multiple hands and Ed Warren's haunting portrait of her from The Conjuring 2 are included, as well as a logo base. I don't know. I got a very bad feeling reviewing Valak again. In fact, I actually did look at the QMX Nun Valak before, about 3 years ago. The mentioning of 5 years, though, at the beginning of this video actually is the gap between the first Nun and now the follow-up sequel that we're getting now in theaters. The original one was 2018. This one now is 2023. Still, though, I'm going to go ahead and grab the tape measure because I thought it would be fun again to look at this figure because all in all, like, I feel the figure has aged pretty well. The only thing really about it is not necessarily the sculpting nor the paint they applied to the piece, but rather I feel like the height is the true thing that unfortunately need to have been changed when they initially released this figure. Still, though, Valak stands about 10 inches in height, or the figure is going to be about 25.5 centimeters tall. So here's what I think when it comes to the figure's height. Bonnie Aarons, who portrays the Nun both in the Conjuring 2 film and the 2 subsequent prequels, stands at 5'8", which isn't that short of a character, short of an actress. But then when you compare her, say, with other 6-scale figures we've looked at before, you see right away the big problem that faces this figure. I'm just bringing in Jason Voorhees for example. Now, Jason Voorhees, if you were to say base this from Friday the 13th Part 3, Richard Brooker stood 6'3". So I think there's a considerable height difference really between the two. Other comparisons, again, I did also want to break, is bringing George P. Wilbur, who of course portrayed Michael Myers in Halloween 4 and Halloween 6. He stood at 6'2". And another comparison, while we're still sticking with evil, not necessarily one who's made of evil, but one who fights evil. Here's also what the figure looks like with the Ace Miss Toys Evil Dead Ash. And Evil Dead Ash, of course, Bruce Campbell, stood 6'1". 6'1", I guess, is the closest in scale to the Nun, but you can still see, like, she unfortunately just, though, gets lost when you have the other figures displayed around her. While sadly coming up a bit short on size, at least the Nun isn't short on accessories. First, the figure comes included with a circular black stand. Jokingly, at the beginning of this review, you probably saw very little in the way of the accessory being removed from the tray, simply just because, again, like most of the accessories were already with the figure as she's been on my shelf. He's been on my shelf this whole time since the last time I reviewed it. The circular stand was one of the things I already had displayed with the figure, but it does have, of course, the Nun printed there along the top. On the bottom of it, if I just spin this around, is presented from the folks over at QMX. QMX are also known for doing all the Star Trek figures, which I did do reviews of quite a while ago if you guys wanted to check those out. They do give you feet, but they're not necessarily rubberized feet. They feel like they could be slightly softer plastic to the plastic that's otherwise already there. But it's just, again, a nice little display stand. It certainly does nicely present the figure if you want to have her on display. The only thing, though, about getting the figure on the stand is that with the dress as long as it may be, you sort of always have to go back then and fix the dress because it's always riding up. You don't certainly want that. She's already angry enough. Moving the stand to the side, Valak also comes included with the portrait that we see in Conjuring 2. The thing I really think that's done well about the portrait is the fact if you flip it around to the back, it actually looks like it's stretched canvas across a wooden frame. Granted, the wooden frame in this case is actually just plastic, but it does actually replicate nicely the look of the painting. And for a while, I had, in fact, Valak holding his own portrait in his hands, with the included hands that come included with the figure. All in all, though, I think it's a really neat-looking portrait. Put that to the side. The figure also comes with a series of swappable hands. The hands that I've had for so long attached onto the figure's forearms were in fact gripping hands. I'm just going to pick the figure up right now so you guys can see. These hands are actually just perfect for holding onto the frame. Initially, when I had done the review of this and even picking this figure up the first time, I was worried that it wasn't going to be able to hold the picture properly. Just though, if you get the hands gripped around the frame properly here, it's sort of hard to do when I'm holding the figure here. Let me just put it down here for a second. Yeah, with the thumb and the fingers the way that it is, it actually holds the picture frame really perfect. and it doesn't ever fall out. For a while, again, I've had Valak displayed on my shelf with the picture frame, with the portrait painted, displayed in his hands. We're going to put that to the side also as well. The figure also comes with a series of swappable hands, most of which have already been left behind in their plastic prison, simply just because, again, I had the figure displayed for a while with these hands. But he, I keep wanting to say he comes with sort of scaring you hands, sort of peekaboo hands. I'm not really sure specifically what these hands would have served the purpose for. I mean, even if you were just to say relax them and have them to the sides, it sort of doesn't look like they would be suitable hands for even doing that. I mean, they're almost too flat of hands that I almost feel like unless he is just scaring somebody, the hands I don't feel serve much of a purpose other than that. There is also this hand here as well, which is clearly suitable for holding something. I suppose what you could do is you can have the picture being held with one hand, for example, and it does a pretty good job of holding that as well. All the hands, by the way, have been cast in white plastic. Fairly decently done here as well. Very skinny fingers. Bonnie Aaron, as an actress, is a very lean and limber-looking character, actress, and she certainly portrays the character of the nun quite well. If you, though, want more spooky hands, these are certainly the hands for doing the job. I really like to look at these hands, and if not for really the fact I had Valak displayed with holding the picture, I probably would have just defaulted to these hands instead. These hands, I think, would be best suitable, probably be displayed again with the next other accessories that we're going to have a look at, like, for example, the alternate head sculpt. But overall, again, I like the look of the hands. The figure also comes included with a cross. Now, I've taken the liberty of removing the cross for right now, just because, again, I want to show you guys how to attach it onto the figure's body. It seems to be, by the fact that this is cool to the touch, like this could be made of metal. I don't, of course, want to bend it in case I do actually snap it and it turns out to be plastic, but it sort of does feel like it is a metal cross. It is, of course, wrapped around by thin, very thin black strand threading, and that, of course, will fit around the figure's neck. Just before, though, doing that, the figure also comes with an alternate head sculpt as well. Now, strange for me, at least, I guess not so strange. For me, when it came to displaying the figure for a while, I was actually going just with the defaulted head sculpt because I thought the neutral head sculpt for nun looked better. But if you wanted to have a more scarier looking nun, there's also this option available as well. The head sculpt attached fairly easy. The veil, first of all, comes included with both the head sculpts, so you don't have to worry about taking the veil off, replacing it then to this piece. The veil is already attached to the head. You can see it, actually, in fact, it's stitched onto the top of the head with some additional stitching on the back of it. I will say, to the credit of QMX, they really had a plan, I think, to do a whole bunch of 6-scale horror figures, and that never really came to fruition. I really would have liked to see, based on how well they handled the nun here, what they would have possibly done for future figure releases. But overall, I think like the quality done to the tailorship, for example, the way they've stitched the back of that looks really, really good. Swapping out the heads, for example, I'm just going to put this head down here for 1 second. Ironically enough, though, if I can actually just grab the packaging, I'm just going to bring this in for right now. On the back of the packaging, it clearly shows you all the things that come included with the figure. The hands, for example, comes included with the portrait, but ironically enough, it also comes included like this little bust standee. This bust standee, looking around again on the packaging, unless I had a memory lapse and remember putting that somewhere else, did not in fact come included with this little standee. So there really isn't a place to store the alternate head, unless, for example, you have yourself like a little post system or something that you can have just resting. I suppose you could probably also just take the head and rest it on top of the display stand. That would look a little demonic, though. Picking, though, up the figure, and again, getting a closer look at the head sculpt here, the veil is one thing that always will be a problem with nun figures, whether it's QMX releasing the figure, whether it's Necker, whether it's any company that has tackled a nun. Having the veil attached securely is always one of those problems, because they always want to have the veil sort of loose enough that you can move it around, but the veil only really attaches by one place. You can see right there. That little tiny bit of threading is the only thing that's preventing the veil from falling off. So we'll want to be careful, I would certainly say. Be very careful when it comes to actually manhandling the nun. Now, of course, there is a wire frame also here to the side. I haven't really warped it all that much, too, because I think I've got it kind of in a perfect place. I don't know if I really want to change it after that. Head sculpt-wise, though, for even just a defaulted head, I think, again, bears a good, strong likeness to actress Bonnie Aarons. Now, I think Bonnie Aarons has gotten herself into not hot water necessarily, but has claimed that Warner Brothers hasn't paid her sufficiently enough for her appearances, and again, has been making some money, I think, off of merchandise after the fact. I can't speak to that, of course. I'm not Bonnie Aarons, nor am I Warner Brothers. But I will say, from a standpoint of sculpting, this certainly does, I feel, look like the actress. Darker colors, again, areas around the eyes. She sort of has those sort of reptilian yellow eyes, and a black wash around the lips. Again, it's a really nice looking head sculpt. Really, again, to display them with either one of them, I honestly would have just still stuck, I feel, with this head sculpt as my go-to. But I do really like the demonic head sculpt also as well. Changing out the heads is fairly easy. You're going to, first of all, sort of hold on to the top, and you're just going to... Now, you're not going to have to remove the collar piece. This stays behind. All you're really going to do is just carefully yank the head off the ball joint, decapitate Valak, put that to the side. If that was all that was involved, boy, the threat's now over. And when you are putting it back in place, you want to just kind of make sure, like from this side, sort of looks like a sneaker, but you want to make sure like the collar piece fits well enough that it doesn't get snagged when you're putting this on top of the ball joint. I will say, though, about this veil, the veil doesn't seem to sit as well. I'm sure it's probably the same shape of fabric as the defaulted one, but I feel like this never really sits as well as the original one. This one now gives us an opportunity, while still experiencing the darker shadowing around the eyes and still those glaring yellow peepers staring at us. This time around, we get the chance to also now see some fangs, top and bottom rows. The tongue is also painted in there as well. I mean, again, it's a nice looking head sculpt, but I think I'm still, even after looking this figure now a second time around, still going to probably stick with the defaulted sculpted head, just because I like the more neutral expression myself. One thing also, I guess, what we should have probably also done as well is to take the head sculpt back off, put the cross back on, as unholy as that concept may be. Let's just put the head sculpt back in place. Again, you want to make sure that you're not... See, I did that right there. Tucked the fabric in. I'm going to have to fix that just a little bit later. But it certainly does now finish the look nicely. As for the rest of the outfit, though, again, like her proportions are way too small, if you ask me. 5 feet or not, 5'8" or not, I feel like the figure should have had a larger figure frame. I have, since picking this figure up, I've looked online to see if I can find myself a 6-scale figure nun body outfit, because if that's the case, I would love to maybe swap out the body parts. Now, the only problem with that, though, is that you can see, like her arms, for example, his arms, I keep wanting to say her, his arms, for example, still remain a pale plastic. So if I found myself a 6-scale female body, for example, I probably would have the problem, unless I maybe gone in and painted this at the skin tone color of the forearms, unless I was able to cover them perfectly with the sleeves. I know you're probably asking yourself, well, why can't you just get yourself a 6-scale figure? Just disrobe the nun and then put that outfit on the figure's body. Well, unfortunately, one thing that would face with that, I think with the figure being longer, is the dress would then ride higher up. It wouldn't be as long and draping to the floor as it naturally should be. The outfit as a whole, though, is good. I mean, there's nothing I really would have changed to that. It does have, of course, the little front flap of fabric. We can just lift that up. And underneath that is a faux leather belt. It's tied off to the side here. On the back, also has a very similar design. This, by the way, the collar piece has a Velcro closure. So again, if you want to take this off, if you wanted to undress, for example, the nun and swap the costumes around with another, say, 6-scale figure with it, which again, I'm really considering doing, I think you could have a fairly easy time of doing that. If we just lift the dress up here, for example. Now, she does have socks. He has socks going up to the knee area here, and then down below, just regular nun shoes. The thing about the shoes, though, is by leaving a gap space like this, it does break up a little bit of the molding, because, of course, now you have to leave a space so that the feet can properly move around. At least, though, the dress is long enough that you're never really going to see it. You're only going to really see the ends of the feet, and that's all. For the figure's articulation, going back to the head, I'm just going to kind of move, the stand out of the way. I feel that's a bit of a distraction. For the head sculpt on Valak, first the head is going to be on a ball joint, so it does look up, it does look down, and it does move also back and forth as well. The upper body, if I can actually get underneath the collar here, is on a ball joint also as well, so you can move that all the way around. The arms hinge outward at easily 90 degrees. You can bring those arms forward, you can also bring them back. Now, Valak also has a swivel. Now, the way they've worked the swivel is it's not a swivel where it's attached, you know, where there's a swivel normally just below the shoulder. Right here, in fact, about mid-bicep, you can feel there's a cut line right there. So halfway through the bicep, there seems to be a swivel cut. The figure also has a double hinge on the elbow. Hands do rotate also all the way around. And when you get to the legs do split out, although, again, just tight on quarters because the way the fabric wraps around it. Legs split only to about that far. You can bring the legs forward only by just a little bit, and only back by a little bit as well. Swivel at the top of the thigh, double hinge on the knee, and there goes the head, and a ball joint in the ankles. So, again, you can move the ankles back and forth this way and up and down. All in all, again, if I can just retrieve the head sculpt here, maybe what we'll do is we'll stick with this head sculpt for the rest of this review. I keep talking about the fact that the threading is so fine on this, and I go, man, just drop the head. But let's go ahead and just pop the head back in place, fix the veil as best we could. And yeah, again, like I do like the look of Valak. The only biggest problem that's always been plaguing this figure right from day one, is the fact that, again, the figure's way too small. Probably, again, not the best of comparisons, but just to once again slide over Valak and just to bring in a figure that I'm sure many horror collectors already have in their collection, the Richard Brooker, or somewhat Richard Brooker, Friday the 13th Part 3, Jason Voorhees. Standing at 6'3", Bonnie Aaron's 5'8". Yeah, it should have been a little bit closer in quarter, closer in scale at least. I think like the nun should have gone to at least the shoulder of Jason. She's way too short. I'm doing it again, he's way too short. That's the only thing about the figure. If only I could find a nun 6-scale figure costume, I would keep the head sculpt as it is. I would just simply replace the hands, take those hands and move them over to that 6-scale body. And I would want to have, I think, a Bonnie Aarons nun a lot taller than what we got presented here from QMX. I'm not sure what they based this scale on, and it would be certainly curious to have seen what they would have done with future 6-scale horror figures. If they based it around the proportions of the nun, for example, would that have mean, for example, if they had done other horror figures, that they probably would have only been to about, what, here in height? Maybe it was a good thing that QMX never handled a horror property after that. But yeah, that's the only one thing about it, is the fact that Nun is way too short of a figure. If not for that, I think overall, Valak has aged pretty good considering how long the figure's been around for. Wrapping up now things and final looks for the QMX of the Nun Valak. One correction I did also make to the figure wasn't just simply changing out the head sculpt to now scarier one, and also now changing out the hands, but also one thing I did just now notice about the figure's body, especially more so the dress that she wears, is the fact this whole time of having the figure displayed, and in fact also the first time I reviewed this one like 3 years ago, never really noticed right away that I had the dress the wrong way. That little strip of fabric that drapes around the front and drapes around the back of the dress that covered completely over the belt, and some of you may have already noticed that and commented down below. I can't see that. This is real time. But this whole time I've actually had that draped over the belt, and I couldn't figure out why on the shelf, other than Valak obviously being way too short, I couldn't figure out why something looked off on the figure until I realized I had to tuck that underneath the belt. Of course, now that I've fixed the problem, and I still have the problem of still Valak being too short, but at least that's one problem that's been fixed. I can check that off the box. Now, of course, going back to the idea that Bonnie Aarons as an actress is 5'8", and yet this figure I feel conveys more an idea that the nun is sitting more around 5'4". The figure I think is still a big problem is the fact that it's way too small. If only it had been just maybe a half-foot head taller. That's all it needed to be. So it was a little bit more in line with the rest of the 6-scale figures on my shelf. If you have, say, for example, Valak only displayed on his own, then I don't think it's so much an issue, not one that you'll notice right away. But the moment you start to put Valak along with other figures, this has already happened for me, and I always have to kind of keep moving Valak to the front. Poor Valak ends up getting overshadowed by all the much taller figures around him. Other than that, though, it's a nice-looking Valak, and it's the closest one we've really gotten when you think about it for a 6-scale. There was also another third-party 6-scale nun, but I think from a paint and sculpting standpoint, it didn't deliver as well as the one that we got here from QMX. What do you guys think of the nun? Let me know down below in the comments section. Also, as well, a video question to pass around to you, the viewing audience, is what's your favorite film from the Conjuring universe? So happens to be, considering that we're looking at the nun and all, my favorite film is still The Conjuring 2. Not only do I like the influence of having the Amityville horror tied into it, but it also introduces us to the nun Valak the first time, before, of course, the subsequent sequels, or should I say prequels, that we've now gotten of the character. But what's your favorite film of the Conjuring universe? Let me know down below in the comments section. Also, as well, let me know if you have had this figure in your collection. Always let me know down below in the comments section. I always like to hear from what you guys are doing when it comes to your own collection space. Also, as well, if you guys enjoyed this video, I want to hit with a like. If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing and certainly do want to stick around for more, while I may not promise anything nun related for a little while at least, there's definitely going to be a lot more reviews coming your way. As always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.